Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, Treatment Designed for Youth, a look into our online team program. My name is Jeremy, and I am a representative from EHN Canada. We are a nationwide network of treatment centers for addiction, trauma, and mental health. We have facilities in Nanaimo, British Columbia, Calgary, Alberta, Toronto and Peterborough, Ontario, Montreal, Quebec, and Annapolis County, Nova Scotia. We offer high-quality inpatient, outpatient, and online treatment programs. For more information, please visit our website at ehncanada.com. Just for some housekeeping items, everyone is on mute and cameras are off for today's webinar, but please feel free to use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen to submit questions for our speakers today. We will try to get to as many as possible at the end of today's session. Again, today's webinar is being recorded, and we will be sending out a follow-up email next week that will include the link to today's video, the slides of today's presentation, and any other useful resources, as well as your CEU certificate. Now to introduce today's speakers. First, we have Dayna Browne, the team lead for Healthy Minds Comprehensive Team Program at EHN Outpatient Services. Dayna adopts a unique, holistic approach to client intervention. As a registered MSW, she is a solutions-focused and CBT therapist. Dayna has strong experiences with mindfulness, CBT, and emotionally integrative coping strategies with young people to facilitate growth. As a practitioner, she has found great success using a client-centered approach in conjunction with CBT/ACT therapy, being adaptable and values-focused to build inner resourcefulness and healing young people. She takes a strengths-based stance in her work, focusing on resiliency, building, and the development of self-compassion as vital in approaches, CBT, brief solution-focused counseling, and trauma-informed work. She has led instrumental interventions, worked in crisis response, and practiced with youth as a young professional over the past decade. Dayna is driven to use her talents as a musician and visual artist to continuously practice as an interactive and engaging therapist for the next generation. She is enthusiastic and committed to applying principles of arts and media that are integrative with evidence-informed approaches in order to create accessible treatment services for positive youth development outcomes. Our second speaker today is Lany Shaker Snipper. She is the National Director of Outpatient Services here at EHN Canada. Lany is a registered psychotherapist and mental health leader with almost a decade of experience in launching innovative, effective clinical programs, both online and in person. She combines her expertise as a clinician and business leader to develop it and implement evidence-informed short and long-term addiction and mental health programming. Through previous leadership roles, including clinical director of Bellwood Health Services, Lany has gained expertise in setting human resource priorities to promote corporate mental health and developing wellness programs to enhance staff retention, recruitment, and performance. She now applies her valuable skill set to enhancing and expanding EHN Canada's portfolio of outpatient programs nationwide. So please welcome Dayna and Lany.
My turn? Thank you so much, Jeremy. We are so pleased to be here today to discuss such an important topic. And as you all were coming in, I saw some folks putting in the chat where you're joining from. So I saw Alberta, Ontario, BC, and New Brunswick. I might have missed a few, but we're really, really pleased to see folks joining from across Canada because we know that youth and teen mental health is an issue that touches so many communities in Canada and across the world right now. So we've got, we'll just go to the next slide, please. We've got a lofty agenda for today and goals that we want to get to. So we're hoping we'll get through all of it, and we really want to leave time for your questions, and we want to hear from the folks that have taken time out of their busy days to join us here today. So we will try and leave time at the end for questions. But the purpose of today's webinar is really to talk about what's going on with our youth and teens in Canada right now with mental health. We want to do an intro to EHN's response to the need that we're seeing in the community for teen mental health. A quick review of the efficacy of virtual care, which is a question we get a lot from our partners and constituents. We want to talk about our process for developing this youth and teen program, the thought that went into it, and our rationale for why we set the program up the way we did. We're going to review the curriculum that we've developed, both the youth curriculum and the caregiver curriculum. We're going to talk about our outcome measurement and our approach to outcome measurements. And we're going to talk about how do we keep these teens in the program so we can provide as much support as possible to them and really help them see meaningful gains. Next slide, please. So if you're here, if you showed up to this webinar, you likely have your finger on the pulse of youth mental health in Canada right now. You know that things are dire. Things weren't great before the pandemic for youth and teen mental health. We have at times a fragmented mental health system. Our youth tend to be underrepresented when it comes to services. And youth and teen mental health is complicated and complex and does require subject matter expertise in order to provide optimal care for these youth and their families. So just some stats here, they're probably familiar to you, but I will go through them because it really touches on why we felt so passionate and enthusiastic about launching this youth program, because it's so clear that there's a need right now in Canada. And again, these stats, if I remember correctly, I think they might be from 2019, which means we can assume that they're actually significantly worse since the pandemic. So we know that suicide is the first cause of death for youth ages 10 to 24 in Canada. We know that males account for 75% of suicides that are occurring. 20 to 25% of youth have at least one mental health disorder. 25% of our youth are struggling with a mental health disorder, and only 1 in 5 get mental health treatment. We know that in Ontario alone, there's a wait list of 20,000 youth awaiting treatment. And what happens while they're on that wait list can be really scary. We know that there's youth that are self-harming and that make suicide attempts and sometimes completing suicide while they're awaiting treatment. And we also know that the longer that youth wait to get treatment, the more likely they are to become chronic, to have chronic mental health issues. So we really want to be able to catch these youth before their acute issues become chronic issues. We know that students with mental health challenges and disabilities are often the victim of bullying, which of course is going to exacerbate their mental health symptoms. I mentioned wait lists. We know the wait for treatment is a year or more, and we know how many youth, 20,000 or more youth on these wait lists. 50% of mental health illnesses experienced by adults begin before the age of 14. So we have a beautiful opportunity here to support youth as their mental health issues may be arising, or even to take a proactive approach to mental health. And this is a stat that always shocks me and dismays me, that Canada has the 3rd highest youth suicide rate in the industrialized world. So we're in a crisis here, and you know, EHN, we've historically treated adults, and what we're finding when we treat adults is that many of them are disclosing, I've had mental health symptoms and issues since I was a child, since I was a teen, and they weren't addressed, or they were undertreated, they weren't treated at all, they weren't recognized. And so we really want to change the discourse about teen mental health and open up conversations early with teens and their families about how to optimize mental health support. And we'll get a little later into the presentation, we'll talk about EHN's specific response to the need that we're seeing. So if we just go to the next slide, there's a quote here that we really liked, and we just wanted to share with you from Dr. Child and Adolescent Psychiatrist at Sick Kids. So there was a study that came out, I believe it was in early 2021. Research from the Sick Kids Hospital in Toronto shows a large majority of children and youth have experienced harm to their mental health during the first wave of the COVID-19 pandemic. No surprise there. We know that our youth, especially in provinces where schools and services were shut down, we know that they were struggling. We know their families were struggling. And so what Dr. Korzak says is that we found that overall children were faring mostly worse and occasionally better compared to their pre-pandemic selves. So that's really, it really saddens us. And as mental health leaders and mental health clinicians, we want to make sure that that we are really supporting our teens and families in addressing their mental health symptoms. So we'll just go to the next slide where we'll discuss what our program looks like. So we've created a program. We actually just launched it this week. Dayna is leading those groups and the individual sessions that the youth receive in the program. And so far, so good. The youth are engaged and happy to be in group and reporting already reduced levels of anxiety, even after from the beginning of their group to their end of the group. So we're quite pleased by that. And of course, we'll be measuring outcomes. So we'll actually have data that tells us how our youth is doing and how our program is performing. So we launched this week. I will mention before I go any further that we did launch a pilot program in October of 2021. We partnered with the New Start Foundation, who has provided via the generous private donors funding for youth to go through this program. So many of the youth that we're seeing in this program are funded via the New Start Foundation. And our pilot that we launched in October was funded by the New Start Foundation, which is committed to youth and teen mental health. So much of the learning that we took from our pilot, we've applied to our program now. And this is the new program, that new and sort of improved program that we've come up with. So youth ages 14 to 18, grades 9 to 12. Our preference is that the youth are enrolled in school. We find that it provides some structure to our conversations. And so we are looking for youth that are enrolled in school, grades 9 to 12. We recognize that is a significant age span for teens, and so we are mindful of that in our groups and individual sessions, that there will be varying levels of sophistication and maturity or experience in receiving mental health treatment. So that's something that we're mindful of. And it's not always related to chronological age either. We may have a 14-year-old that's more advanced than some of the 18-year-olds in the group. So that's something that we keep an eye out for. The program is comprised of both group and individual sessions for the youth. So the youth receive a total of 44 face-to-face hours with Dayna, and that's either individual or group. And this is a really important part of our program, is that we're not just supporting the youth, we're also supporting their caregivers. So while the youth are traveling through this intensive program, their caregivers, assuming that they're willing to participate in the program, are also traveling through their own support that is structured differently than the youth support, and it's with a different clinician. We work together as a team, but we're very mindful and careful to separate the support that the caregivers are getting from the support that the youth are getting. But we really think of teen mental health as a systems issue, and we want to be able to support the family system, rather than just supporting the teen and expecting them to both make and maintain gains on their own. So really proud of that caregiver component. And Dayna's going to say a lot more about both the youth and caregiver curriculum a little later in the presentation.
Absolutely.
Group size is 10. So we don't want to go over 10 youth. We find that that's the sweet spot. That's enough for us to have rich and engaged conversation, for us to be able to be creative with our evidence-based practices that we're using. And if one or two youth can't come for some reason, we still have a robust group that we're working with. Anything over 10 starts to feel a bit crowded, and reports are that the youth don't feel that they can get the airtime that they require to make their meaningful gains. So our group size is capped at 10. And there are features that we're also really proud of that are included in this program. We have our app, it's called the Wagon app, and we've created specialized content for youth that they can use in between sessions to support the learning that they're doing in the program. We also, as I mentioned earlier, and Dayna will touch on this later in the presentation, we're also measuring outcomes. We want to know how our youth are doing. We want to know how our program is performing. The only way one of the ways that we can do this is by collecting data from the youth. So we'll be doing regular outcome measurement over the course of treatment. And then we find that communication is really important when you're treating youth and teens. And so we will be doing regular reporting to the caregivers on the youth's progress. So careful not to disclose unnecessary details, but being able to provide the caregiver with an update on the goals and that the youth has set for themselves and their progress in reaching those goals really helps us make sure that, again, we're taking a systems approach to the teens' mental health support. So on to the next, who is a fit for this program? We really want to set the teens up for success. So we're mindful not to take teens into the program for whom our program is simply not a fit. We recognize that teen mental health is complex and layered, and we also know that taking a teen into a program when we know that the parameters of our program will be too limiting for the team's needs is not helpful. So we have a fairly rigorous assessment process. We have a master's level clinician who is going through a very carefully curated admissions screener with each teen to ensure that there's a fit. So we're looking for teens, as I mentioned, ages 14 to 18, experiencing mild to moderate mental health symptoms. So what we're looking for are, if a teen is too severe, we want to make sure that we're not bringing them into the program. And if we do decide that, in fact, we will bring them into the program, really doing some careful planning around how to make sure that they are able to have a meaningful experience in the program, even though they are in the severe end of the spectrum. So a teen who's tried other services before and requires more. So maybe this teen has an individual therapist or has gone to a group or talks to their school social worker, and it's been helpful, but they're finding that they're looking for more. They're looking for something more intensive, something more engaging, something with more structure. That this would be a good program for them. Willing to engage in group therapy. So this is something that our admissions counselor talks to the teens quite a bit about because it is a requirement that they engage in group therapy, but we help set them up. We provide them with information and a lay of the land, so it doesn't feel quite as scary, because it can be quite intimidating, especially for youth who are struggling with social anxiety, to imagine sort of disclosing in an authentic way in a group setting. This is a virtual program, so they do have to have access to high-speed internet and appropriate hardware. Appropriate hardware would be a laptop or tablet. We've found that folks who are using smartphones to engage in group, it's just simply they're not getting the full experience. And so we do ask that they have a tablet or laptop. And while this isn't necessary, it's really encouraged and would be an asset to the teen's progress to have an external support or their caregiver willing to participate in the program. So we would take a youth whose caregiver is refusing to participate, but we know how much it enriches the youth's treatment to have that caregiver as part of the program. We go to the next slide, we're just going to talk about who's not a fit for the program. And so you'll notice in the subject line, we put who may not be a fit. The reason we do that is because this program is unique in Canada. There's no other program like it where youth are able to get intensive individual and group support. And so we're cognizant that we don't want to turn youth away if we don't have to. But these are red flag areas where we simply say we don't know that our program will be able to provide the support that you need, and we want to set youth up for success. So a diagnosis of borderline personality disorder may not be a fit for the program. Active suicidality or self-harm, active mania, active psychosis, a recent psychiatric hospitalization, diagnosed bipolar disorder, disordered eating behaviors, and untreated OCD. And I will say, when we do have youth that come in that do disclose any of these issues, there is a rigorous and a process that we go through with our clinical team to determine suitability and fit. And if there is one of these does appear, and we do think that the youth may still be a fit for the program, we do safety planning and sort of advanced work with the youth to make sure that we set them up for success in the program. We'll just go to the next slide, which is about risk and how do we mitigate risk in. Oh, no, sorry. No, we're talking about virtual. Sorry about that. We're talking about the benefits of virtual treatment for youth. So a lot of benefits to virtual treatment. So of course, youth are reporting and their families are reporting no travel time. If you live in a city where there's a lot of traffic, or if you live in a remote area, needing to travel to get your mental health support can actually be a barrier. And so by doing it online, we find that we have higher adherence and completion rates because folks aren't dropping off because their busy lives isn't permitting for even more commuting and travel time. And many of the youth, of course, don't drive. So it requires their families to either drive them or feel comfortable having them go long distances on public transportation. A youth state they really, really like doing therapy from the comfort of their homes, often the comfort of their bedrooms, where their peers will say, "Oh, well, what's that thing behind you? What is that?" And it sort of creates for this like relaxed and engaging conversation that sometimes is prompted by the youth being in the comfort of their own space. Youth are reporting reduced anxiety. It's really hard for youth with social anxiety to show up in a group, in person, and to feel comfortable enough to disclose. So being in their own space and feeling like they have a bit more control over how they show up to the group we hear reports of reduced anxiety. We talked about, of course, access for those in remote and underserved areas, which is a big issue we're finding with youth. They simply don't have the services in the area they require to get the support they need. We're really proud also of, because this is a national program, we have youth from across Canada who can join. So you might have a youth in Ontario getting sort of peer support or engaging in conversations with the youth from New Brunswick. And it sort of enriches the therapeutic space to have that kind of regional diversity. And we're also finding better adherence, as I mentioned, in completion rates because of many of these factors that I just listed. So if we can just go to the next slide, please. So a lot of questions about the efficacy of virtual treatment, and we have a sort of a collection of studies that we're happy to share with you, with anyone that's interested about in-person versus a telephone or virtual therapy and the efficacy of it. But I like this quote from Dr. Amy Chung, who's a youth psychiatrist at Sunnybrook, and she says, "Virtual care has been a helpful tool to stay connected with patients. It's effective in the continuation of patient care, monitoring of their treatment, and the ability to adjust as needed." And this is coming from a youth psychiatrist, and we at EHN are finding the same thing when it comes to virtual care for youth. Now we're going to talk about risk, which is an important topic. Next slide, please. Thank you. How do we mitigate risk in a high-risk population in a virtual setting? So I went through our exclusionary criteria. So we have really clear criteria. And if we do have a youth that we're, as I said, accepting into the program, even though they endorse one of the exclusionary criteria, we're engaging in intensive safety planning and prep to make sure that we have a plan in place should the youth be at risk during treatment. We insist on clear communication between all key stakeholders, including the youth's emergency contact, their caregivers, any support for the youth. We want to communicate with them, especially if they're a high-risk youth, which many of these youth will be. So that's really important as well, and where our regular reporting comes in really handy. Our admissions counselor, Dayna, who does an orientation with the youth prior to them coming into treatment, that's an opportunity to identify issues that may interfere with treatment, and also protective factors, which is really important as well. So that we want to have conversations about what are events or issues that may interfere, risk issues that may interfere or come up during treatment, but also what do you have in your life that's working that we consider protective factors over the course of treatment. Of course, identifying safety plans and a safety person, as I mentioned. Really, it's so important with teens to orient them to the program and to orient their caregivers to the program, to really set up clear expectations of our role, what they can expect from the program, the gains they can expect to see. And so we want to have really clear and crisp communication with both the teens and their caregivers. We have a rigorous risk protocol, which includes a dedicated support counselor who is available at all times while the teen program is running. So if something comes up during the program and Dayna identifies a risk or the teen identifies a risk, we have a master's level clinician who is available to reach out to the teen, to do safety planning, to do risk assessment, to connect them with crisis services if needed. So I'm going to hand it over to Dayna now, who's going to go more deeply into some of our considerations when we were building this program and to talk more deeply about our curriculum.
Thanks, Lany. So I'm going to take it over from here. I'm going to talk about several aspects. Firstly, I'm going to talk about a lot of the considerations when designing a teen program. There are several things that we considered. Some of them have been mentioned, and one of the key focuses that this program is highly interactive. It is focused, as discussed, on mild to moderate youth who are presenting symptoms in such a way that they can be treated in a short, brief, solution-focused therapy program. Again, we also considered the transitionary stage of teen lives. They're in constant development and change, especially during pandemic times. So we wanted to make sure that we considered that in our choice of therapy, which our modality is ACT therapy, which is definitely a very flexible and value-oriented approach, which helps guide youth in their decisions and the moves that we want them to make, hopefully towards improving symptoms eventually. Some of the other things that we considered in our delivery is that this program is gamified, it's dynamic, it's brief. We wanted to emphasize these factors in our program because they lead youth to developing practical skills through these mindfulness strategies that are interactive, and they help with tolerating distress. They also emphasize practical approaches. So in addition to mindfulness, we're looking at DBT approaches, which are very much focused on practical paired breathing, temperature, very hands-on skills that youth can use as much as they can in their everyday life to de-escalate symptoms and be preventative in our approach. Again, I mentioned that, we're definitely working in a delivery that's brief and solutions focused because we want to emphasize the importance of youth being able to learn skills in a practical way, but also to set future SMART goals so that youth are setting goals which are realistic and that builds their confidence. A few of the considerations in terms of outcome measurement is that it really helps us, inform our program and track progress. It's a collaborative approach, which really helps keep us in dialogue with youth, that helps inform the trajectory of the treatment approach that we use. And it also allows us to monitor symptoms very accurately. And it's driven by the reporting of client. And so we can adjust things as needed and include other interventions to make it much more robust, especially because we follow up on a consistent basis weekly in individual, closely monitoring symptoms, particularly for youth who do have more severe and moderate symptoms that present. The other thing I wanted to emphasize was the focus on suicide intervention and prevention, that this program, looking at that data, can really encourage us to do that early intervention, especially with teens who are presenting at 14 years old. We know from the research, as Lany discussed as well, that individuals who engage in behavior that is self-harming at a very young age have a greater risk of dying potentially later in life. And so we really strongly encourage that these types of interventions at this age can hopefully, prevent that and give them the tools that they need for future success. I'm going to get into the caregiver support as well shortly. I wanted to highlight a few more things around DBT. The other thing that we really focused on is the distress tolerance, which I had mentioned with DBT, but also the self-soothing exercises that come from using a very mindfulness-focused approach, which is really looking at not just meditation, but games, but like interactive strategies, music, media, and the arts, which are tools that youth have access to on a daily basis. As discussed, we coupled this with an app. Youth have the use of therapy and guiding their symptoms and using these mindfulness strategies through an app daily, which really makes it super accessible for them. We also considered the value of aftercare. So we really looked at this as a really empathetic care continuum. We wanted to focus on having these maintenance sessions with these sorts of supports so that we are able to clearly and consistently monitor youth in the long term to prevent relapse. The other thing we really focus on is the peer support aspect. So when we talk about collaboration with external supports, reporting, we're focusing on resources, as you know, many youth are already engaged in other forms of support, but this is a more robust intervention that includes their peers, that includes myself and another support counselor, to really ensure that we're working with external supports and the current model to kind of give them that extra boost in terms of skill development and symptom management to cope better. The other thing I wanted to focus on now, can I go to the next slide for caregiver, please? Okay, so I think I covered many of these things. Can go forward, please. Next slide. Okay, so I really wanted to talk about the caregiver curriculum as well. This is really vital that we're teaching skills for parental coaching and cooperation, the conversational element, and focusing on EFFT. So we chose this type of therapy purposefully. It really wires together treatment between youth and caregivers. This is really super important at this age where youth are really engaged with the family dynamic. And we particularly wanted to emphasize how important it is to empower parents to really be able to guide, help, and sort of reinforce those skills that their youth are learning, because at the same time, they are also able to then interrupt symptoms, support health-focused behaviors through the skills in those caregiver workshops that they are learning with our specialized caregiver family therapist as well. We also wanted to highlight the importance, particularly with older youth who are facing other sorts of educational and external pressures that may impact safety and also their level of symptoms. And so we wanted to speak to the graph here, which we're looking at not only youth age, but we're looking at the nuances of grades. We're looking at also the gender analysis, and therefore we can kind of effectively respond to the different subtleties that youth present, because there's a huge difference developmentally. As Lanie said, it's not necessarily linear, but there are differences obviously in a youth who's in that sort of adult transitionary stage in their later years versus a youth who may be 14 and presenting and experiencing emotions that may be fueled by other stressors that are quite unique and different. We also wanted to focus on the caregiver component because it really helps build awareness, and it also helps create a really robust level of boundary setting strategies and techniques for parents. It really helps them to repair like relational injuries within the caregiver youth dynamic, and to have those difficult conversations that are very necessary to kind of resolve conflict and also mediate crisis situations as well. Okay, I think we can go to the next slide, please. Okay, so there's a huge value in maintaining and being able to measure the ongoing progress of outcome measurement. As Lanie discussed, we're using some of this data to be able to provide really solid, progress reports to caregivers on the self-reporting and the symptoms that youth are presenting to mark their progress, to really give parents highlights of what youth are experiencing, where the shifts have been made in their behavior, and how that can also inform caregiver responses. So this is really critical for the caregiver component. It's super collaborative. It's focused on alleviation. We're also using the data, as mentioned here, to inform the treatment plan. This is a super conversational and collaborative approach with youth. We want to note where progress has been made. We also want to observe and notice areas of challenge, right? By doing this, we can appreciate shifts in behavior while still keeping in mind we want to think through other areas that may need work and apply different skills with the therapy approaches we're using so that we can challenge false beliefs and uncover other strengths and resources to help youth progress in their journey with their mental health. There's also a critical component of organizational transparency and accountability and being able to measure through hard data these symptoms decrease or increase that youth are presenting when they do report in. We can also help prioritize items for clients, the presenting or primary struggles that they're experiencing from their perspective, and really be able to align that with what matters to youth and the caregivers and helping youth be really set up for success as they transition out of program as well. You can go to the next slide, please. Okay, we want to really ensure that youth have the full engagement and benefit of this program. So how can we really support that they adhere and participate? Part of the highlights here made are really ensuring our program is very inclusive. We're very much focused on not just safety planning in a risk management context, but also really looking at inclusivity, looking at emotionally focused and safety focused processes. So making sure youth know guidelines and expectations, ensuring protocols within group where youth feel safe and comfortable to really address their concerns and share the things that they are experiencing, which is really important for their own progress. We also combine talk therapy, as I've mentioned, with somatic and sensory gamified approaches. So youth are learning in a very relevant way that's really applicable to their everyday life. Youth are very much into activities and the use of media, music, and other game-based mindfulness strategies. And this really helps with the use of metaphor, with the use of hands-on and practical approaches that really helps transfer skills in a meaningful way for young people. Talk therapy, we realize, may not be enough, but with using the evidence-based modalities that we discussed, we can really ensure that we are asking the right questions and using these interactive strategies to get the results we hope for with young people. We're also including very teen-specific content from feedback and having those adjunct services like the app. Youth are able to identify critical goals that they would like to work on. So whether that's improving their concentration at school or improving their leisure activity time, there's a whole series of different categories that youth are able to select with the guidance of myself as a therapist and really work through those goals in a very realistic way. We're also looking at integrating caregivers, as we discussed, into the healing and transformation of young people's lives. And we're doing that through the caregiver sessions, reporting, and also just being available for parents to troubleshoot issues that may come up and learnings that are being done at the time of program. We also want to connect families, as Lany had discussed, and remove barriers to care by providing private funding and providing the aftercare maintenance, which instills and reinforces the skills that they've learned. I would like to also kind of emphasize that in aftercare, they're not only able to explore the skills that they've learned and discuss how they have made an impact on their lives, but they're also learning new skills in the process, each individual biweekly session that is built into the curriculum as well. We also wanted to highlight finally that this is not a burden on youth. This is built in to accommodate their school schedules. It's designed in such a way that it's flexible and that it doesn't interfere with extracurriculars or family planning. So we really did strongly consider all the dynamic aspects of a teen's life. And so far, it's been an amazing week with the youth. As Lany highlighted, we have a strong reporting that youth are experiencing a symptoms decrease already in first session, which is remarkable for youth who are struggling with anxiety and social anxiety and other functioning challenges. So I'm really happy to be a part of this and lead this program.
Perfect. Well, thank you both so much for that informative presentation. I told you both before that our audience is very interactive and we'll ask lots of questions, and they definitely delivered. So we can deep dive into those questions. So first, this is more of a logistics question. So how to run a program nationwide throughout Canada with 1 or 2 social workers. Do the social workers need to be registered in each province that the child is located in?
Sure, I could answer that directly. Yes, absolutely. I myself am registered within the applicable provinces that the youth would be a resident of. So yes, that would be correct.
Thank you. And then our next question is more so focusing on the recruitment process. So what was the recruitment process like for youth and their caregivers? And then gives an example of, did you just put up a poster and people showed up, or was it more targeted?
It's a great question. We didn't put up posters. We've I actually feel like Sue Ann, who's hiding over there, is probably the best person to answer this, but it was targeted. So we focused on digital. And we also have longstanding relationships in the community with hospitals and organizations that are family and teen oriented. So as soon as we were ready to launch, we reached back out to those organizations to let them know that we had launched our program, and they were fanning out the information to their networks as well. But our efforts, our marketing efforts, are almost entirely digital. And I will say it does take some time to build momentum. So if you're part of an organization that is hoping to launch a teen program, and we are encouraging of lots of people to launch teen programs, we don't want to be the only game in town. We want to see other organizations and companies starting to launch similar programs, because we know there's certainly enough youth for us to be supporting. So what I would say is it is a long lead time, and it is important to give yourself a nice stretch of getting the word out there before you launch your program. So 3 to 6 months of talking to community partners, digital strategies, getting onto social media, to really let folks know that you're around and you exist.
Yeah, definitely. Just to expand on that too, the focus is, like you said, digital and focusing on social media as well. So obviously this is an app-based program as well. So integrating into that kind of network, I think, was really important in that sense too, to make sure it's accessible for teens. Because I know myself, I'm not a teen, but I can speak to like being like constantly glued to my phone and finding all my resources through social media. So as a marketing team, we really like use that as an effort to focus on more targeted campaigns as well.
Jeremy, you're not a teen?
I know. Does the bald head not tell you I'm not a teen? No, sadly not. Okay, and then moving on, focusing on the type of programming it is. So is it a program that you can enroll in, or is it a referral-based program?
Yeah, no referral necessary for this program. So you can call us directly if you have a teen in your family or in your practice that you think would be a fit for the program. And we'll connect you with our master's level clinician who heads up our youth admissions, and she can talk to you or the teen, of course, directly, and go through the screener to see if it would be a fit. And I'll just tack on, because I thought I saw a question about cost. So Jeremy, is it okay if I just, okay. So the cost of the program is is $4,000. It's a 6-month program with the first, Dayna, correct me if I'm wrong, 9 weeks being the intensive. So that's the portion of the program where the youth are getting 2 hours of group.
Lany.
Oh, sorry, thanks. 8 weeks.
Yeah.
That's the portion of the program where the youth are getting 2 hours of group and 1 hour of individual with Dayna. After the initial 8 weeks, we give them a 1-week break because we feel that that's helpful to just give them some breathing space before we get into, as Dayna said, the aftercare portion of our program, which we feel is a really important part of helping the teens maintain their gains. So that portion of the program is the remaining four-ish months where they're coming to groups, the same group, and continuing with their care. I will also mention that we do partner with the New Start Foundation that based on financial need can provide funding. So we go through a clinical process first to assess suitability of the teen, and if the teen or the family discloses that they require financial support, then we work closely with the charity that could provide partial or sometimes full support to go through the program.
Yeah, you answered the next question, so perfect. Okay, so this one is asking, how do youth, their families, and schools become aware of this program? I know we kind of spoke about like in terms of our efforts in networking, in terms of digital marketing and stuff like that. So I can just speak for the marketing department as a whole too. We are doing a lot of efforts, much like today's webinar, to kind of build awareness for the program in itself. We are making strides within school board contacts and stuff like that as well to kind of integrate ourselves into the more educational system to make it at least known that we are an available resource for today's youth. And then moving forward, there will be more focused programming and social media campaigns and stuff like that too, with webinars in conjunction with it as well. I don't know if either of you wanted to kind of piggyback off of that, but that's just speaking from what we're doing as a team right now. I know you guys are both aware of that, but okay.
Yeah, I will say that we, Dayna and I and the rest of the team lean heavily on Jeremy and his team to really support. They use their infrastructure, their expertise, their knowledge to support us getting the word out. So if you're a small outfit, it might be a little tougher to get the word out. But as I said, long lead time and using your existing partnerships and relationships to let people know that if you're planning on launching a similar program. But also you can tell people about us because we're really excited. We want to see as many youth as possible. We're launching cohorts every 4 weeks, and we want those cohorts to be full because we really want to support, we really want to do our part in supporting improvements in youth mental health. So please let people know about us.
Yeah, word of mouth is the best type of advertising for sure. Okay, and then more of a program specific question. So can you give examples or tell us more about how the program uses media, music, and game-based mindfulness?
Sure. So I would say in terms of visual and game-based mindfulness, we're looking at strategies that really look at the use of song, for example. So some of the strategies are gamified and media-based together. So an example of this would be using a song and lyric and also sounds in song to actually promote the development of mindful awareness when listening. And so this really increases a youth's ability to practice mindfulness in a way that's suitable for their age group, right? As we know, a lot of youth, especially in this program, are very, game focused and very interested in the arts. And so using strategies of songs and lyrics that are really relevant to their everyday life really engages them right into the program and into seeing, you know what, mindfulness is not this gimmicky meditation that I'm going to do. Not that we're opposed to meditation. We absolutely do the standard and formal, that sort of sitting meditation practice or even body scan practice, but we really want to look at how does this get integrated into a young person's life on a day-to-day basis, right? And so using music, using games, like games that, you know, are very focused in many youth programs from a clinician and from an expert level. Like I use these games and ask follow-up questions to promote social, you know, social skill building and to alleviate social anxiety in groups. So youth are really aware, and they become very aware of their anxiety levels even as they engage in group, as many of our youth struggle with social anxiety. And so we're using an array of approaches. We're also using visual arts, for example. We're doing things like tracking breathing, as we know that breathing is really critical for calming the mind and body. So we're also looking at mind-body connection in youth being able to practice paced breathing, right? So we use standardized, like treatment-focused approaches with breathing strategy, but we're also looking at drawing out our breath in sort of heartbeat, you know, rhythmic patterns, and looking at and analyzing as a group, like, what does our breathing look like? What does that mean, right? I could go on, but there's there's a million things that I'm using in program, and I love this stuff, and it's especially helpful even in individual session because we have that component, and I'm able to customize it to a particular youth's interest level in certain areas of their life. So games, or if they're more interested in the arts aspect, I can really build on that too and personalize their therapeutic experience with me. But I have very general approaches as well, and arts-based strategies built in consistently within the groups that I run too. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dayna.
You're welcome.
Now a question: can youth participation be mandated by courts or anyone else?
We've not seen that yet. Yeah, we've not experienced that in our program yet. I've certainly heard of such a thing, but we've not had a youth or their family come to us and say we've been mandated by the court to participate in this program. So we don't have a relationship with the courts yet, where we're considered, where we would be considered like an official or preferred partner of the courts for a mandated program. But it's an interesting question. And actually, now that it's been asked, thank you to whoever asked it, I'm going to explore that further. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. And then is there a train the trainer opportunity, or is the program being offered only by your team? As identified, the waitlist for mental health services is quite lengthy. So I'm curious how many independent sessions are being offered at one time.
Yeah, we don't have a train the trainer yet. I mean, it's an interesting idea for us to explore. We're still, you know, we're still new. This is a new program for us, so we want to really make sure that we've established the best practice in virtual teen intensive treatment before we start disseminating or teaching others. But it's certainly something when we're able to see our outcomes and track data, when we see meaningful gains and positive outcomes, it's something that we could consider. As I mentioned before, we will at any given time have a census of 20 for this program. So two cohorts of 10. And we're planning for scalability because, again, our hope is that this is a program that grows because we know the need is there. So right now we have Dayna and a couple others on the team, but the plan is to scale up as the demand increases.
Thank you. If an adolescent is not accepted into the program due to a quote unquote red flag, do they come back to their primary care provider to be cared for, or are they referred onwards to a higher level of treatment?
So we don't have an official referral process. So we wouldn't be recommending a specific clinician or program if the youth is not suitable for our program. So we might say in general terms that the youth might be more appropriate for a residential program, or might be appropriate for a DBT only in-person program, if, for example, if they have borderline personality disorder. But we're not making specific recommendations for other programs, partly because there are so few. So, and we wouldn't want to be in a position where we're either recommending a program that's suboptimal or a program where there's a 2-year wait list.
Perfect. And then one last question. How are you both doing? It's been such a busy time for you both. So how has the program been going? How it just like high level, how are things? How has October been? I know the answer. I know it's probably just been absolutely bonkers, but this is the mindfulness check-in, I guess.
What a great question. Thanks, Jeremy.
Yeah,
I'll start and then I'll pass it over to Dayna.
Yeah.
I have to say, like, there's a lot of people on this webinar today, and I'm sure many of you work in mental health, and I would guess that your experience is paralleling our experience for the fall of 2021, which is that we've been slammed. The folks stepping forward and making requests for mental health, be them adult clients or teen clients, it's grown exponentially. And of course, that's good news because we want to treat and help as many folks as possible, and bad news because it tells us that the situation is so dire. So how I'm doing, it's a combination of real enthusiasm and excitement, especially about this youth program and the direction this program will go, and some concern for the state of mental health in our communities right now. So I'm a parent myself. I have 2 young children, and so I feel particularly passionate about this youth program. Just thinking about how acute mental health episodes in childhood can lead to chronic mental health episodes in adulthood. So I would say mostly I'm going into the fall and winter of 2021 with a lot of excitement and enthusiasm.
Yeah, similarly for me, like I'm super excited and I'm actually grateful to be part of this process. This service is so critical for all the reasons that we've already discussed, that there is something that's really relevant, intensive, but yet able to integrate the whole family dynamic within our service. It's just so unique. Like there's nothing like it in Canada. And so I just, I feel really blessed in that regard. In terms of your question, Jeremy, how am I feeling? I'm very elated about this program we launched this week. It was a super exciting experience for me. As I said, I thought the youth, may be a bit more reserved or kind of quiet in group, and they were so supportive of each other. They engaged with the material. It was absolutely amazing. I checked in with our support counselor after. She was also really impressed by the level of activity and just rapport building in group. And it was really exciting, and following up with several youth, right, more closely, just to hear their feedback about programs so far. It just motivates me when we have new cohorts coming in, just to kind of maintain that level of energy and excitement. I'm also an aunt too, and I've been specializing in this area for, several years as a professional, like young professional. So I'm just really passionate about the work, as you can probably hear in my voice.
Perfect. Yeah, amazing. That's why I've asked too, because I know this was launch week. So it's very, very fresh, which is awesome that we can get the word out. And then actually one of our participants today already wrote a blog piece about it that is in our chat about our today's webinar in the program. So feel free to look at that. We'll include it also as a follow-up resource in our email too. But Dayna and Lanie, I want to thank you both so much for today's webinar and for the very educational, informative, and insightful information that you gave to us today. So thank you both so much. And we're looking forward to having you both again very, very soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. In terms of everybody else, I want to say thank you so much for attending today's webinar. And we will be sending a follow-up email next week that will include a recording of today's session a copy of the presentation slides, and a copy of your CEU certificate. So stay tuned for that, and we hope to see you at future webinars. Thanks so much.
Thank you.